Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 2020 Power of Literacy Luncheon, presented by the Ladies for Literacy Guild of the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation. Quite a mouthful. I'm Melanie Lawson, and I am so delighted to serve as Emcee for this fabulous literary festival. It celebrates the wit, wisdom, and wonder of our nation's beloved First Lady and the First Lady of Literacy, Mrs. Barbara Bush. Barbara Bush left an indelible impact not only on Houston, but also on our nation through her steadfast commitment to the cause of literacy and bold vision of literacy for all. Your support of today's luncheon furthers her legacy and helps outstanding childhood literacy programs all across the city. Your generosity and support are deeply appreciated. And we've got an incredible program for you today featuring members of the Bush family and friends of Mrs. Bush who loved her dearly. We also have a few fantastic surprises in store for you as well. After all, Mrs. Bush loved a good surprise. Well, anyone who's ever met Mrs. Bush knows what a special and loving person she was. She really made everybody feel like a member of the family. I know that every time I saw her, she always asked about my parents first. But I remember one time she stopped me at a charity event and asked me about my health. Now, many of you may know that I've had multiple sclerosis for more than 2 decades. Well, she told me she'd recently read a book about a new treatment and she wanted me to see it. I thanked her and didn't think any more of it. But a few days later, that book showed up in the mail, along with a personal note from Mrs. Bush. I remember thinking that with all the people she knew and as packed as I knew her calendar was, that she took the time to do that. It was such a special moment and also a testament to just how much she read and kept up with so many issues and ideas and how thoughtful she was towards everybody. As much as I already admired her, I think it made me love her even more. And I'm sure many of you have equally wonderful stories about her. Well, it is now my great pleasure to introduce a special friend of Mrs. Bush who guided her as she reached the pearly gates of heaven. If you would, please help me welcome Reverend Dr. Russell J. Levenson Jr. He is the rector of St. Martin's Episcopal Church, and he will offer our invocation.
What a great opportunity to gather together in this way for this special event. We are now in St. Martin's Episcopal Church, which was the worshiping community of the President and Barbara Bush for over 50 years. While they sat in many places, they most often sat here in this spot. And we're grateful for the many memories we have with them here at St. Martin's. I've been asked to offer a brief invocation as we begin our time together. So wherever you are, if you're with someone, you might want to take their hand. I invite you to bow your heads. Let's have a brief word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the many blessings you have bestowed upon us. We thank you for your love for the whole human family. And we thank you for this opportunity to gather together. We pray your blessing on the program that will follow. We give our thanks for all who have made it possible. But most especially, we give thanks for this foundation that has made the gift of literacy and reading and books possible for so many people. And we do give our profound thanks this day for the hard work and the vision and the leadership and the friendship of Barbara Bush. All of these things we ask in your name. Amen.
And now, if you would, please welcome co-founders and co-chairs of the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, Neil and Maria Bush.
Good afternoon. Neil and I wish to extend our deep appreciation to the Ladies for Literacy Guild and generous sponsors of today's luncheon. We are deeply grateful to Foundation President Dr. Julie Fink and her incredible staff, President Trish Morelli and President-elect Lisa Jekyll, production duo Danny Ward and Nancy Ames, and luncheon co-chairs Sydney Faust and Betty Hincher for making this extraordinary event possible. Thank you for honoring Barbara Bush's life and legacy in such a special way through her 3 virtues: faith, family, and friends.
Mom had many names, including Bar, First Lady of Literacy, the Enforcer, Silver Fox, Ganny, and several others she probably would think would be inappropriate for me to mention in public. Regardless of the name, she remained the same, a sharp-witted, no bones about it, remarkable woman who had a long and wonderful life, well lived at the side of her hero and true love, and surrounded by family and friends she held dear. We continue to be amazed at and grateful for the incredible work of the Guild. Thank you again for keeping Mom's legacy alive and for being points of light in the literacy cause. Without further ado, please welcome co-chairs Betty and Sydney.
Thank you, Neil and Maria, for your special welcome remarks. Sydney and I are pleased each of you have graciously joined us this afternoon for Unforgettable Tales, bringing to light our beloved Barbara Bush. My husband John and I were neighbors and friends of Mrs. Bush and President Bush for more than 2 decades. Never does a day go by that I don't think fondly of them and cherish the moments we spent together, whether it was celebrating on special occasions or simply exchanging stories about our grandchildren while we walked together with her dogs, Minnie, Me, and Bibi. Oh, how Mrs. Bush loved her dogs, and they loved her back. You may know that Mrs. Bush was often seen in public with her 4-legged furballs, and that she frequently took them on school visits when she read to children. Indeed, they rarely left her side. I vividly recall one morning when she invited me to walk and said she would drive by and collect me. When I saw the large black SUV pull up, I quickly ran outside, opened the back seat door, and hopped in, seeing Mrs. B and Minnie Me. As I leaned over to give her a customary hug, the enforcer, or so she was affectionately called by her family, shouted, "Stop! Minnie Me bites." Needless to say, throughout our friendship, it was the biting dog who kept me in line, relieving the Secret Service agents of their duty. Mrs. Bush played an important part in so many people's lives, creating special stories in the chapters of their life novels. We thank her for that. And we wish to thank the people who have transformed our luncheon into this remarkable literary fate. Our host committee, the Ladies for Literacy Guild, and the staff of the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, especially the extraordinary Dr. Julie Fink and Aubrey Leatherman. We are so grateful for Nancy Ames, whose tireless work secured some of the most celebrated names in the entertainment world. Phillips 66 has once again served as our title sponsor for this year's Power of Literacy Luncheon. Many thanks to Greg and Gail Garland and the entire Phillips 66 team for your continued generosity. Special gratitude also to Janice McNair for graciously serving as this year's literary champion. Please refer to your program for a complete list of all of our wonderful sponsors and supporters and extend your appreciation to each of them. We are truly grateful for your generous support, which provides underserved Houston children and their families with access to high-quality literary programs and resources. Since the inaugural Power of Literacy Luncheon just 5 years ago, more than $1.75 million has been invested to help change the futures of thousands of children through the power of literacy. Now, here's my co-chair, Sydney, to share more with you about today's event and the Ladies for Literacy Guild.
Thank you, Betty. It's been such a joy to work with you and our small but mighty group of women who had a grand vision for this event to honor our First Lady of Literacy and Ladies for Literacy Guild founding member, Barbara Bush. I had an opportunity to spend time with Mrs. Bush in her home following the first Power of Literacy Luncheon, and it was a day I will forever treasure and never forget. Corsu Monk and I were in charge of favors for the luncheon, and had created a beautiful blue leather bookmark and framed it. Betty wanted us to present it to Mrs. Bush, but explained that Mrs. Bush didn't like visits to go over 30 minutes. Betty kept her eyes on her watch and politely stood up at the designated time. Mrs. Bush discreetly signaled for Betty to sit down. We were having such a wonderful visit and ended up staying for over an hour. I think she was truly enjoying herself. Mrs. Bush and I had connected because we had both lived in West Texas, Midland, and Odessa. She was gracious, down to earth, a great listener and storyteller, generous with her time, and genuinely thankful for the works of the Guild and the dedication of our members. My husband Don and I have been supporters of Mrs. Bush's literary cause and the foundation for many years, and it's a true blessing to play a role in advancing her cause by chairing this luncheon alongside Betty. Thank you all for spending your time with us. Now I'm here to share how you can spend your money with us too, to make a meaningful difference in the lives of children, so many of whom in our city are in need of your support now more than ever. Mrs. Bush was known for many things, her signature pearls being a notable one. We hope you're wearing your party favorite pearls today in her honor. And speaking of fabulous, we are so grateful to our friends Tony Bradfield and Kevin Black at Tenenbaum Jewelers, who have once again donated a double strand of exquisite freshwater pearls, the type worn by our dear Mrs. Bush for our raffle. Aren't they gorgeous? Tickets are 1 for $100 and 6 for $500. The virtual raffle will be open until 1 p.m. today, so there's still time to participate. To purchase a ticket, visit our website at bushhoustonliteracy.org/Pearl Raffle. The winner will be announced at 1:30 p.m. today on the website. I would like to add my thanks to Lisa Jekyll, who has graciously served as our raffle and wine sales chair, along with the many friends and donors who have made today not only possible, but a fabulous fate for literacy. To tell us more about our important work and mission of the Ladies for Literacy Guild, please welcome Guild President Trish Marilli.
Sydney and Betty, you've done a tremendous job as ambassadors of Mrs. Bush's legacy. Thank you for your stewardship and leadership. Nearly 6 years ago, I attended a tea and heard Mrs. Bush speak about her vision of literacy for all. I was in awe of her presence, her passion for literacy, and her ability to effortlessly prompt such a dynamic group of women to action and service. Ladies for Literacy was formed that day, and it's remarkable to see what a difference we've made together since that time. Today, I am honored to serve as Guild President. Undoubtedly, the pandemic has shed light on the vast educational inequities that exist, and it's amplified the importance of our collective work to ensure that all children have access to books and educational initiatives from home to homeroom. Indeed, our efforts to empower children through literacy are more important now than ever before. Despite the current challenges, the Ladies Guild has pivoted and creatively responded to the pressing needs of our students. We've reached thousands of children in multiple languages with the launch of We Read, our virtual read aloud initiative. We've supported the gifting of more than 100,000 new books to HISD children through the My Home Library program. We've transformed our annual community book drive into a curbside drop-off event, enabling us to provide 1,500 books to stock libraries at area nonprofits. And we partnered with our friends at Houston Children's Charity to provide beautiful new books to children they serve. Today, I am so pleased to announce that our signature Curiosity Cruiser fleet is once again growing with a third super library on wheels hitting the streets of Houston in just a few months, thanks to a very generous donor. I don't think Mrs. Bush would be proud of us. I know she would be proud of us. Proud that we united around her cause, proud that each of us has a servant's heart, Proud that we recognize the literacy crisis in our city and are taking bold steps to provide solutions. And proud that we are all making literacy our own legacy and passing it on. Our calling is to improve lives through the power of literacy. I'm so grateful to you for answering that call, for pivoting with us, supporting us, and for encouraging us. And if you're not a member, please join us. Make an investment in the life of a child. Make an investment in the power of literacy. I guarantee the returns on your investments will be priceless. I hope you will enjoy today's program. And again, thank you for your support.
We want to thank you, Betty, Sydney, and Trish, for those very powerful messages. Well, before we hear from our featured speakers, I've got a reminder for you. Don't forget to purchase those raffle tickets to vie for the Pearls and the Literacy Lovers Package. You can visit bushhoustonliteracy.org/Pearl Raffle to purchase the tickets. By the way, that raffle will close promptly at 1 p.m. Well, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to the voice of CBS Sports, the acclaimed sports commentator and adopted Houstonian, who the Bushes refer to as our other son. Here's Jim Nantz.
Hello, friends. Listen, this is not an easy task. I make my living with my words, but how do you come up with the right words to describe this beautiful woman right here? That so many of us on this virtual experience had the blessing of knowing. She was an amazing American, one of the great Americans to ever grace this planet, that's for sure. And she was many things blended together. She was warm and loving, caring. She was irascible, brazen, spoke her mind, told it like it is. And when you mixed all of those together, you just had one of the most interesting people you would ever meet. She was just a hoot to be around. I mean, nothing but laughs, because some of the things that she would say, you couldn't believe it, but they all made sense and they were done in good taste, but they all cut right to the truth. She influenced my life in so many profound ways, no more so than the occasion of when I proposed to my wife, Courtney, which she felt I should have done maybe a few months earlier. So there were phone calls and notes and all kinds of encouragement. And when I did finally propose to Courtney, and I was going to all along, but I got that extra little nudge. I had one witness. We had one eyewitness. It was Barbara Bush standing just a few feet away from us, making sure that I followed through as she was busy snapping pictures. Imagine having that documented, pictures of your proposal taken by Barbara Bush. This is not a surprise event tonight. My favorite attempted surprise party was her 75th birthday on June 8th of her 75th year. Family and friends, probably 125 strong, had gathered at the Kennebunkport Yacht Club while waiting her arrival on Fidelity 3, coming down the river, docking, and we looked out the window, about to jump out and scream, "Surprise!" And I think it might have been Big Marv. I think Marvin looked out and said, she doesn't look like she's too happy right now. And once she got on the dock and we ran out and did our part, she said, "Hold on a minute, everybody. I want you to know I thank you for being here. But unfortunately, this surprise didn't quite make it. As we were leaving the house, the phone rang, and our wonderful friend Alan Simpson, Senator Simpson, called and said, "Bar, I know you're far too smart not to have figured this out already, so let's not play this charade, this game that you're going to act like you don't know what's happening tonight. I just wanted you to know I wish I could be there." And she said, "Alan, I don't think you were supposed to make this call right now." And she wasn't happy. She hung up the phone. But it ended up being a joyous occasion for everyone, with the night concluding just across the street on Ocean Ave with a stage show, a performance by the Bush grandchildren at this cute little theater just across the way. The only blunder of the night was that someone, yours truly, wore socks that did not match. And who else but Mrs. Bush would notice. And I love that. She didn't miss a thing, that's for sure. So whether you knew her as Mrs. Bush or Bar or the Silver Fox or Ganny, as her grandchildren lovingly called her, she was such a special individual. I'm so glad that her life is so meaningful to this day and will march on for years and years to come, influencing positively so many people. Those celebrations of reading, my gosh, were those wonderful occasions. That's what we still have going on tonight. So thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for supporting it. Thank you for remembering one of the great angels on earth, the great Barbara Bush. God bless you all and have a wonderful night.
My name is Robert Gates, and I have two of my favorite anecdotes about Barbara Bush. The first was at a gathering at Texas A&M, and President Bush didn't brag very often, but he was very proud of the fact that an elementary school in Texas had been named for him, and Barbara, without missing a beat, trying to keep him humble, said, "Yeah, by a vote of 4-3." The second one was the first time I went fishing at Kennebunkport with both the president and Barbara. And we were fishing from the stern of his boat, Fidelity. And she was wearing one of those very big sun bonnets. And my first cast, my line got hopelessly entangled with hers. She was not happy. And she turned her head with that big brimmed bonnet on it, gave me the Barbara Bush eye roll, and I thought, I will never be fishing with these people again as long as I live.
My name is David DEMAREST, and I had the distinct honor, of being the White House Communications Director for the 41st President, George H.W. Bush, from 1989 to 1992.
And my name's Elizabeth DEMAREST, and I'm David's daughter, and I was the little girl on Mrs. Bush's lap in our famous photo.
So I get a call one day from the East Wing. The First Lady is going to be doing a photo shoot for some literacy brochures and needs some children to be in the picture. Would your daughter, Elizabeth, be interested? I thought that sounded great. So we get there and we go into the White House library where the photo shoot's going to be, and there are all the big white umbrellas, and it's looking very formal. And Mrs. Bush has not yet arrived, but the tension level is growing as people are setting up for the shoot. And I realized, to my surprise, that it's not going to be a gaggle of kids. There are only going to be two, Elizabeth and another little boy. And so Elizabeth is now the co-star of this shoot. Well, Mrs. Bush arrives and sits down on the couch and asks Elizabeth and the other little boy to sit next to her. And then Harold Powers, the photographer, tells her what the shoot should look like, and that it should be Elizabeth on Mrs. Bush's lap and the little boy sitting next to her. So the shoot begins, and Mrs. Bush says, "Okay, Elizabeth, time to get up on my lap." And Elizabeth says, "No." Her mother said to me, very quietly, but firmly, "Do something." Well, what are you going to do in a situation like that? So Mrs. Bush said, "Come on, Elizabeth, this is going to be fun. I'm going to read a story. So how about you just hop up on my lap?" Elizabeth says, "I don't like laps." And I'm thinking, since when? Well, her mother then says to me, this time a little more firmly, "Promise her a pony." Well, I didn't happen to have a pony in my pocket, and the idea of trying to tell a strong-willed 3.5-year-old what to do would probably make her not want to do it. So Mrs. Bush just started reading the story with Elizabeth on one side and the little boy on the other side. Well, Carol Powers looked at her, meaning Mrs. Bush, shook her head and said, and didn't say, but she implied that this was not looking right for the camera. Mrs. Bush, without missing a beat, picked up Elizabeth, put her on her lap, kept reading the story, and Elizabeth was none the wiser. The shoot went fine. This photo has been in brochures all over the country, probably all over the world, with Elizabeth sitting on her lap and a little boy sitting next to her. It's a wonderful photo. The good news is I never had to come up with a pony. Sometimes I would bring Elizabeth into my office, and other staff were always thrilled to see other staff's kids. And so I brought Elizabeth down to the Oval Office, not to see the president, but to see the assistant who was sitting in the desk outside the Oval Office. And it was Bridget Montaigne. And so as we're chatting, and she's talking to Elizabeth bolts into the Oval Office. Now, the president isn't there, but I'm a little, frantic because you're not supposed to do that. And so I'm in a very loud whisper saying, Elizabeth, get out of there, get out of there. And of course, she's not listening to me. And pretty soon we hear a voice from on the other side of the Oval Office coming from the study. Who's out there? Who's out there? And Bridget says, it's Elizabeth DEMAREST, Mrs. Bush. She's here with David. And then Elizabeth bumps into Mrs. Bush.
I was looking for M&Ms, and I remember that they were there. And like a bloodhound, I remembered to run into the Oval Office and try to find them. And Mrs. Bush came in wearing this gorgeous hat with roses all over it and had just been gardening. And she helped me find some.
And how did she do that?
She led me back into the Oval Office. We rummaged through the president's desk, and she found me M&Ms.
She always loved kids, and she was there to not be, someone who cared that much about the sanctity of the Oval Office. And she was just responding to a charming but willful little girl.
Well, as you know, our favorite First Lady, Barbara Bush, loved a great surprise. So we got a really big one for all of you. And in fact, I can't tell you how excited I am because I'm a huge fan of this person, and I know all of you are as well. This actress, author, singer, songwriter, philanthropist, and arguably the First Lady of country music shares her sentiments about Mrs. Bush.
Well, hi, everybody. This is Dolly. And I just wanted to add my voice to the tribute to this wonderful woman, Barbara Bush. Everybody loved Barbara. She always had that little twinkle in her eye. You always wondering what she was thinking, probably about something good she could do for children. She loved the children, and I know that all of you will always love her. She left you with so many good things, so many good memories. I know that every night when I perform, I sing a song about my mama and my daddy because they're always with me. I know she'll always be with you. So I know you know how much she cared. And she's out there somewhere still caring. So we'll all carry on and follow through with the work that she dreamed of and wanted to see come true. And it has, and it will continue.
This is Sichan Siu. I worked at the White House as Deputy Assistant to President George H.W. Bush. It was my unique privilege to work for him and Mrs. Bush, to serve them, to know them, and to love them. In December 1989, Mrs. Bush invited a few of us to screen the movie Stan and Iris. She regaled us with the fact that Jane Fonda and Robert De Niro were going to be in the movie. But the story was about a man who wanted to learn how to read. And my favorite line was actually at the end of the movie, when he said, anything is possible. It's something that I could relate to personally. On April 16, 1991, I brought the Dalai Lama to see the President, Mrs. Bush, at the residence. I was just a staffer, and Mrs. Bush invited me to sit with her. That was a very nice gesture. Fast forward, many of us who have been beneficiaries of her penmanship would treasure her letters, her writing skills, her beautiful handwritten notes. In June 2016, I told her that I just finished 40 years living in America. She wrote to me, congratulations on being an old American. 6 months later, my beloved wife Martha passed away, and she sent me a very touching, comforting letter, handwritten, and she addressed the envelope herself. At the end, she said, "I believe in heaven, and we'll all will see her again." Summer of 2017, Doro took me to see her and the president in Walker's Point, and I was treated to 1 hour of wow, wit, opinions, wisdom, vintage Barbara Bush. April 17, 2018, I was in Pampa in the panhandle of Texas, Martha's hometown, when I learned that Mrs. Bush passed away. I said some prayers, closed my eyes, and I saw Martha was waiting for her up there. "Welcome, let me show you around." And off they went, hands in hands, two women I have loved, adored, and admired. In addition to faith, family, friends, my three favorite words that start with the same letters are Barbara Bush Books. Thank you.
And now our next surprise guest shares his stories about his favorite times spent with the Bushes.
Hello, I'm Lee Greenwood with reflections on a former First Lady, Barbara Bush. After the election of the president, I was invited to go to Camp David, spend the night, have dinner with the Bush family, and have some games the next day. We did that. Then we took a Marine chopper and landed on the lawn at the White House. As the president exited the chopper and met the media, Mrs. Bush exited the helicopter and I followed her. As we were walking side by side towards the White House, I noticed her little dog, Millie, the Cocker Spaniel, was walking in front of us. And I turned to her real quickly and I said, "Barbara, how about if I can get one of those pups?" And she quickly said, "Get in line." That was just the way she addressed people. It wasn't meant to be mean. It's just that there was a waiting line and I wasn't going to get one of the dogs. So in 1989, I was also invited to the White House and to have lunch. It was Easter. And as I'm seated facing the lawn, Barbara Bush comes out of the wall. It was kind of a shock at the moment. I'm sure glad I wasn't saying anything that was not good, but I wouldn't have ever done that anyway. In admiration, she sat and had lunch with me and talked about how important it was for the children who were finding their Easter eggs on the lawn that morning to get a good education. She really believed in that. After the attack on America, 9/11, 2001, it was about 3 months after that, and Barbara Bush and I visited all the military bases we could within the United States. It was important to her to visit with the military children. And she spent hours and tirelessly explained to each one of them, no matter what their age was, that the education was more important than anything to achieve success in life.
Well, no memories about our beloved First Lady would be complete without some thoughts from some of her family members. And we are so thrilled to have musings about her mother from daughter, philanthropist, and best-selling author Doro Bush Koch, and reflections about her Granny from her granddaughter, best-selling author and co-host of Today with Hoda and Jenna Bush Hager.
There were so many things I loved about my mom, but one of the things is that she always made people feel good. And she had an instinct about her. When someone was feeling maybe down or having difficult times, she had an instinct to go in and make them feel better. And I just recently was in a spin class and a woman came up to me and said, "I have to show you this picture." And it was the picture of my mom with her walker. I think it was in the year 2015. And my mom loved to walk up and down the beach with her walker. And she did so till she couldn't walk anymore. And one day, evidently, she was walking down the beach and she saw a little boy with his walker. And my mom went up to the little boy and said to him, "Oh, I see you have a walker." And the little boy nodded his head and Mom said, "Well, I just want you to know I have a walker too." And the mom came over and she said, "You know, my little boy can't see. In fact, he was born without eyes. And so she said, you know, thank you for coming over and thank you for making us feel better. And it was his aunt who came up to me the other day in spin class, and she said, you have no idea what this meant to our family when your mother came up and made little Tyler, that was his name, feel good about walking on a walker. My mother had a way with words. She was very funny. Sometimes growing up, when we would do something stupid, which was on a regular basis, she would say something like, okay, stoop nagel, whatever that means. And then sometimes when we did something that she thought was kind of smart, she would say, well, that's using your head for something other than a hat rack. But she always had something witty and funny to say, and I really miss that.
I learned so much from my grandmother, Barbara Bush. She was hilarious. She loved to laugh. She used to say, humor helps. And I really miss sitting around the table with her laughing constantly. She was funny in a way that sometimes could be biting, I have to admit, but really it wasn't mean. And the other thing I miss about her so much is that every morning when we would go stay with her in Maine, she'd be up really early. She loved to write letters and she loved to read. And so I would see her in the little screened-in porch as I got my coffee, and she would have her stack of papers in front of her letters. She wrote letters up until almost, I think, the week that she died. I received one from her a couple weeks before she died, saying that she had received a letter from her old roommate and that I was going to Durango, Colorado, and I should look out for her roommate. And I met her roommate after she passed away. And so I just thought it was so hilarious, and also what a life to continue writing all the way until the end. And reading, of course, too. I miss sharing books with her. I would always ask her for recommendations and send books for her that I thought she would love. My grandmother definitely loved the little things in life. She loved nature. She liked to be outside in her garden, looking at her flowers. And I remember being a little kid, and we tried to rile her up, which sometimes we did. She would swim and swim and swim with her dogs, barking beside the pool, and we would try to do cannonballs over her body, which I think, we did sometimes get into trouble for that. But she just loved to be outdoors. She thought that a life well lived was spent with people that you love in nature. And I think that that's something that's very true. And I miss her every time I jump into that pool. I can still see her swimming laps there.
Well, two of Mrs. Bush's favorite entertainers are up next. First is the comedian and Television Hall of Fame inductee who held court for 22 years as host of The Tonight Show. Of course, we're talking about Jay Leno. This actor, writer, and producer had these memories to share from the set of his current CNBC hit show called Jay Leno's Garage. And right after Jay, you'll hear from the Bush's beloved friend, a country singer and songwriter, really a superstar, an actress and producer who sold more than 75 million records. It earned her the title of the Queen of Country. Of course, we mean the one and only Reba McEntire.
Of course, we're here to honor a wonderful woman, Barbara Bush. I thought she was great, and she had a great sense of humor, There used to be a commercial on TV, remember? I've fallen and I can't get up. And they used to show this white-haired woman lying in bed. And every time the commercial ran, I would always say, is that Barbara Bush? And I said it once on The Tonight Show, and I got this phone call, that wasn't me! And one time she came on the show, and, very serious. And I went to see her, and I said, thank you for coming. And she grabbed my hand, these fingers like this, and squeezing. Are you still making jokes about my son? Huh? Are you? Ow, ow, ow. And it really hurt. She almost broke my hand. And I was trying to remember some of the jokes I did about her back in the day. Oh, here's one. I think she was not thrilled with this one. I remember once at a memorial dinner, First Lady Barbara Bush once said, "As I watch him guide our country through this difficult time, I can't help but wonder, is this the same kid I used to spank?" And here's the weird part. She's talking about Donald Rumsfeld. Boom. No, she was a wonderful lady. I enjoyed her company tremendously. I miss her tremendously, and God bless her, and God bless all of you too. Thanks.
I have always loved Barbara Bush. She was one of a kind. I learned so much from her, as I know everybody watching this video has. If you've ever been in her presence, you saw her fieriness, her wittiness, her outspokenness. We were sitting at lunch one time. Gene Becker had said, if Mrs. Bush ever calls you dearie, that's when you're in trouble. And so we were having a discussion, and I said something, and Mrs. Bush looked at me and said, "Well, dearie." And I went right like that to Gene, and she went, "Yeah, you've been dearied." But I love her, and I miss her so much. I'll never forget the time we were in Greece, and we were all on the beach, and she and 2 Navy SEALs swam back to the yacht. I couldn't have done that at all. She's a little spitfire. Absolutely. I loved her with all my heart, and great memories, and I'm so glad she let me tag along on trips, and when they would come by the Houston Rodeo and say hi. Cherished moments I'll never forget. And to the Bush family, thank y'all for letting me be a part. And thanks for sharing your family with me and so many of the country music artists. We love y'all. Y'all are special people.
I'm Andy Card, and I used to be working at the White House for Deputy Chief of Staff for George H.W. Bush and then Secretary of Transportation. Then I was Chief of Staff to George W. Bush, but I'm an engineer by training, an academic by accident, and a politician by disease. I love politics. I had the privilege of meeting the Bushes in the early 1970s and fell particularly in love with Barbara Bush, who ended up being a tremendous conscience in everything that I did. And she was wonderful because she told us, when in doubt, keep quiet and let others talk. Listen. They'll be happy that you let them talk, and you might learn something. And that fits with what my grandmother used to tell me. She used to have 2 statements: taste your words before you spit them out, and don't leave the room until you go out the door. And she said, if you come into a room and you tell everybody what you think you know and you don't listen to anybody else, you'll walk out of the room dumber than when you walked in. So Barbara Bush reminded me of my grandmother, and Barbara Bush became a conscience the same way my grandmother became a conscience to me. But probably the most interesting story that I can tell you is that when you get caught off guard, Barbara Bush was famous for recovering quickly if she was caught off guard and teaching us to recover quickly if we're caught off guard in a situation or in a place where you don't know what's going to happen. And I remember when she received an invitation in 1981 when President Bush was Vice President of the United States, and Barbara Bush went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to get an honorary degree and give an address. And I remember that she was also invited to be part of a discussion about illiteracy. And she was kind of surprised because she was supposed to lead the conversation about literacy and the need to eliminate illiteracy, and she felt that she wasn't really an expert, and so she was caught off guard. But I remember what she did. She practiced what she had preached and said, I'd like to know what you think should be done about literacy, when she met with all of these people out at this small college in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she prompted them to come up with what they would have as solutions. And it ended up being a wonderful conversation, and she convicted everybody in the room, and they convicted her to do more to fight illiteracy. And so she did practice what she preached, and she did listen, invite people to talk, and learn. And she was quiet and effective.
It is such an honor to introduce this historian and Pulitzer Prize-winning author who has chronicled some of America's greatest leaders. And among those, of course, President George H.W. Bush's biography called Destiny and Power. Here to share his insights about Mrs. Bush is writer and commentator John Meacham.
So 10 years ago, I was at the National Book Festival on the Washington Mall, an event created by Doro Bush. And I was on my way at that point to give my talk about Andrew Jackson. And a woman ran up to me, which doesn't happen enough or ever. And she said, "Oh my God, it's you." And I said, "Well, yes, existentially speaking, that's hard to argue with." She said, "I love your book so much. Will you wait right here? I want to get your new book and have you sign it." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I was standing there absolutely feeling as if this is the way the world was supposed to work. Women are supposed to run up to you. They're supposed to buy your book. It was a twofer. Hand to God, she brought back John Grisham's latest book. So whenever I think I'm the most important person in the world, I remind myself that somewhere in the country there's a woman with a forged copy of The Runaway Jury. The story goes on. The next day I was in Maine. I was a guest of President and Mrs. Bush. I was at that point working on my book about President Bush. And for some reason, it was just the three of us at lunch one day, which was very unusual. As you all know, in Bushland, usually, the Oak Ridge boys would be playing tennis and Gorbachev would be grilling salmon. It was an odd universe, but it was just us. And I told the story of being mistaken for John Grisham. And I will confess to you, it was an entirely transparent attempt to get either the former president or the former first lady to say, "Oh, you're so much more important than John Grisham." Barbara Bush looked across the table and in an inimitable way of hers and said, "Well, how do you think poor John Grisham would feel? He's a very handsome man." So it was an 0 for 2 weekend for me. But what she said was funny and frank, true too. And so much of Mrs. Bush's life was about being funny and frank and true. In her service to the nation, in her service to family, in her service to literacy, she was a beacon of light in a world too often given to shadow and darkness. And for that, we honor her and thank you for all you're doing in her memory and for the cause that meant so much to her.
I think we can all agree that Barbara Bush was indeed a remarkable and a very special woman. We're so grateful to members of the Bush family and her many loving friends for sharing and delighting us with their stories. Her memory and her legacy shall continue to live on through the work of the Guild, those stories shared by those who knew and loved her, and the indelible impact she made on countless people all across our nation. On behalf of the entire Ladies for Literacy Guild, we want to thank you for joining us, for supporting childhood literacy, and for choosing to make literacy your legacy. Together, we will continue to brighten futures and change lives through the power of literacy. Here to close our program, please welcome back Reverend Dr. Russ Levenson Jr.
Well, it's great to be back in this place that was so special to the president and Barbara as they worshiped here for so many years. I'm delighted also to have an opportunity to share a memory like others have for this important gathering. My memory comes from July 15th, 2015. Many of you will remember the day when the president fell and broke his neck. My wife and I were guests of the Bushes that day, and we were just coming over to the house for breakfast when that happened. And what followed was a day at the hospital until there was a diagnosis and treatment began. I remember the next morning, before Barbara returned to the hospital to be with the president, she called me and there at the house and wanted to know if I wanted to join her for a walk on the beach, nearby Gooch Beach, not too far from Walker's Point. And so I joined Barbara and the dogs, BB and Minnie, got to the beach, and it was a chilly morning, even in July, and the wind was whipping off the North Atlantic. And as we began to walk, she stopped, put her hands on her hips, looked out and said, isn't it beautiful? And I was struck by the fact that she paused to say that. We walked to the end of that beach, and on either end of that beach, there are jetties with large boulders jutting out into the raging North Atlantic. And I noticed as we got to one end, Barbara had this habit when she would go on a walk, she would get to the end and she would touch one of those big boulders with her foot and say, "Have to touch a rock." And she did that. And we turned and walked a little bit more. And Dora joined us with her big dog, Rocky. And somebody came up to talk to Barbara. And so Dora and I kind of peeled off and we continued to walk till the other end of the beach. And when we did, I noticed Dora, without saying a word, kind of pointed her foot out and she touched the rocks. Didn't say anything, just touched the rock, turned, and we all walked back together. As I reflect on that day, I consider really the president and Barbara to be two great rocks. They have shown us so many wonderful things. Their faithfulness to the friends is just unmatchable. Their fidelity to their family is incomparable. And their faith, not a wear it on your faith kind of, wear it on your sleeve kind of faith, but a real faith, an earnest faith lived out in service and love. The things that give life their deepest meaning. If you take away their public roles, they're like most families. They have memories. They have happy days and sad days. They have tears and laughter. But, I think it's fair to say they've shown us what gives life its most, value. Treasures like decency and character and dignity and integrity, honesty. As I said, they had a vibrant faith, and shortly after the death of the president, I was called to the president's office by his chief of staff, Jean Becker, who's become a good friend over the years. And she gave me this that's become an important treasure for me. It's actually their prayer book that they use. And these are the prayers that we used here. And we prayed at their home, and we prayed when they were at the end of their life, and we prayed during their memorial service. When Barbara came to this place the last few years, some people don't know that she was having back trouble, and she didn't want people to know. And so she would come and she would slip out of the pew a prayer book or hymnal, and she would put it behind her back to kind of prop herself up without much attention being drawn to herself. To me, that's a wonderful reminder of the gift she's given to us through this foundation, books and literacy and reading for untold numbers of people around the globe, that they too might be propped up to live life as a full journey, to be blessed by knowing great stories and great history and the things that books offer us. So what a blessing it is to have known Barbara and George Bush. What a gift it is to have this foundation. What a treasure it is to have supporters like you to help it keep going. Thank God for all those things. Thank God especially for Barbara Bush. God bless you.